Ever feel like you'd give anything for just a few minutes of quiet when your baby just won't stop crying?
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, today we're diving into a parenting classic that might just hold the answers. The Happiest Baby on the Block by Dr. Harvey Karp.
It's a good one.
It's packed with research-backed ways to soothe your little one, almost like finding your baby's built-in off switch for crying.
You make it sound easy.
Well, Dr. Karp starts by explaining that babies aren't just tiny adults. They're more like, well, tiny fetuses.
Yeah, he compares human babies to other mammals. Did you know a newborn horse can practically run a derby on day one? Our babies? Not so much.
Okay, that's a pretty stark contrast. But what does that have to do with all the crying?
Dr. Karp says human babies are essentially born 3 months early in terms of brain development.
3 months early. No wonder they need so much comfort.
Exactly. They've just come from the womb, a place of constant motion, warmth, and sound. Crying is often their way of saying, hey, I miss that feeling.
So we need to recreate that womb experience. That makes sense, but how do we do that in a way that actually works?
It's more than just holding them. It's about recreating specific womb sensations that trigger their calming reflex.
And that's where his famous 5 S's come in, right?
You got it. It's not magic, though some parents might disagree.
Well, I was going to say, it almost sounds too good to be true.
It's not magic, it's science. Each S is a specific action. Swaddling, side stomach position, shushing, swinging, and sucking. Each one taps into those womb sensations they crave.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's break down each of these S's, starting with swaddling. Isn't that a bit old-fashioned?
It's definitely made a comeback. Swaddling was common for centuries, but fell out of favor for a while. But we're rediscovering how important that snug, contained feeling is for newborns. It's like a gentle hug that reminds them of the womb.
Makes sense. So how does swaddling actually calm a crying baby?
Well, imagine being a newborn. Your arms are flailing. You feel like you're constantly falling. It's overwhelming. Swaddling provides those gentle boundaries they were used to in the womb.
It's like a security blanket, but all around them. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. On to S number 2, side or stomach position. That seems a bit counterintuitive since we're always told to put babies on their backs to sleep.
You're absolutely right to be mindful of safe sleep. And Dr. Karp emphasizes that babies should always be placed on their backs for sleep to reduce the risk of cesides.
Right, of course.
But when you're actively trying to calm a crying baby, holding them in a side or stomach position can be very effective. It mimics their natural position in the womb.
So it's more about how we hold them when they're upset, not how we put them down to sleep. But why does that side or stomach hold help soothe them?
Because it prevents that feeling of free falling. Think about it. In the womb, they were constantly curled up. When they're on their backs, that unfamiliar feeling of falling backward can trigger their Moro reflex, that startle reflex.
Wow, that makes sense. So it's all about recreating that feeling of being held and secure. Now let's talk about the shushing part of the 5 S's. How loud are we talking here? Like a gentle shh?
Think more like a vacuum cleaner.
A vacuum cleaner. Really? That doesn't exactly scream soothing to me.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but remember those sounds your baby heard constantly in the womb? The whooshing. Well, that was about as loud as a vacuum cleaner. It's what they're used to, what feels familiar and safe.
So it's all about recreating that white noise they're used to. Like, is that why white noise machines are so popular for babies these days?
Exactly. White noise machines tap into that primal need for soothing sounds. There's even this funny anecdote in the book about a baby who was instantly calmed by, you guessed it,
Right?
a vacuum cleaner.
No way.
Yeah, her parents, they stumbled on it by accident and were totally amazed at how quickly it soothed her.
I can imagine. Okay, so we've covered swaddling, side stomach positioning, and shushing. What's the next soothing sound in our baby calming symphony swinging?
You got it. And not gentle rocking either. We're talking vigorous, jiggly motion similar to what they felt in the womb.
Oh, right. Like all that jostling around as you went about your day.
Exactly. That's why many cultures use things like slings or bouncy cradles. It instinctively soothes babies. It's all about replicating that intense rhythmic motion.
So those baby swings you see everywhere aren't just for show. They're actually recreating a familiar sensation. That's fascinating.
They can be. The key is that the movement needs to be pretty vigorous, especially when your baby is really upset. You can always gradually slow it down as they calm down.
It's amazing how these techniques, which might seem odd at first, actually make so much sense when you think about things from the baby's perspective. Okay, so last but not least, we've got the final S, sucking. I mean, we all know babies love to suck, but what is it about sucking that's so calming?
Well, sucking is deeply soothing, and it's not just about satisfying their hunger. Sucking actually triggers the release of calming chemicals in the brain, like endorphins, which help them relax and even fall asleep.
Ah, that explains those milk-drunk comas I see my niece drift off into after breastfeeding. So it's
Right.
like a natural relaxant.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is why pacifiers can be so helpful for some babies. They provide that non-nutritive sucking that can be incredibly calming.
Speaking of pacifiers, I know there's a lot of debate about when to introduce them, especially for mothers who are breastfeeding.
Oh, for sure. It's a common concern. Dr. Karp actually recommends waiting until breastfeeding is well established, usually around 2 to 3 weeks, to avoid nipple confusion.
Nipple confusion, meaning like the baby might have trouble latching onto the breast if they get used to a pacifier.
That's exactly it. It's always best to give breastfeeding a good head start before introducing other sucking options.
That makes a lot of sense. I bet that's super helpful advice for new parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered all of the individual 5 S's, but how do they all work together to actually calm a crying baby? Do you just pick and choose? What does that look like in practice?
Well, it's not quite as simple as picking and choosing. Dr. Karp actually calls his method the cuddle cure, and it involves combining all these elements in a specific way for maximum effectiveness.
Okay, I'm definitely ready for this secret formula. How does this cuddle cure actually work?
So the first thing you do is swaddle your baby nice and snugly. Then hold them in that side or stomach position we talked about. Then, while you're holding them like that, start jiggling them vigorously, and I mean vigorously, almost like you're shivering. And while you're doing that, you're shushing loudly near their ear.
Wow, it's like all the things all at once. So it's really all about recreating all those womb sensations, just like we were talking about.
Precisely. It's like a symphony of soothing sensations. And if after all that your baby is still fussy, you can offer your finger or a pacifier for sucking.
This is amazing. It's so much more specific and research-backed than the general advice you usually hear about calming babies.
Yeah.
This is really cool. I have to admit, it's pretty reassuring to know that there's an actual biological basis for all this crying, and that we as caregivers actually have tools to help. It's not just us. But I am curious, when can parents expect things to get a little easier? When does this intense newborn phase start to fade?
Yeah, usually around 3 or 4 months, most babies are starting to transition out of this super intense, like fourth trimester phase.
The fourth trimester, right, because it's like an extension of their time in the womb. So at 3, 4 months old, they're finally starting to grow out of it and develop some of their own self-soothing skills. Does that mean we can start, I don't know, weaning them off the 5 S's a little?
Exactly. They're gaining more control over their bodies and their brains are maturing, so they don't rely so heavily on those external soothers anymore. And actually, the book has some really great advice on how to gradually wean your baby off each S without, like, totally disrupting their sleep, which I think any parent can appreciate.
For sure. Gradual transitions are key. So for parents listening who are maybe just getting started with all of this, is there anything else they should keep in mind as their babies grow and change?
I think it's just really important to remember that, yeah, this intense crying phase is temporary. It will pass, I promise. But those first few weeks and months are just so crucial for a baby's development. Something Dr. Karp talks about that I think is really interesting is that calming your baby isn't just about stopping the crying, it's actually about helping their brains develop.
Really? Tell me more about that. How is soothing a baby connected to their brain development?
Well, when you soothe a crying baby, you're not just meeting their immediate need for comfort in that moment. You're actually like shaping their neurobiology. It's pretty amazing. Like all that cuddling, all that holding, it releases hormones like oxytocin, the love hormone.
Yeah.
And that plays a key role in bonding and reducing stress, not just for the baby, but for you too. But for babies, especially, these positive interactions, all that love and comfort, it actually builds neural pathways in their brains.
So it's like those early experiences are literally shaping their brains.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It's amazing, right? And it really highlights just how crucial those early interactions are between a parent or caregiver and their baby.
It makes you realize how powerful those simple acts of love and comfort truly are.
For sure.
Wow, this deep dive has been so eye-opening. I feel like we've learned so much, not just about these specific techniques, but about what babies need and how we can support their development in those crucial early months.
It's about meeting them where they're at developmentally.
Exactly. And honestly, it's reassuring to know that there are things we can do to make that transition a little smoother, both for our babies and for ourselves.
Definitely. And, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely. It takes a village, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me, and hopefully for everyone listening, is that those cuddles aren't just about stopping the crying in a moment, although that's definitely a nice bonus. They're really about building a strong foundation for a lifetime of well-being. So as tough as those early months can be, it's good to remember that they're also incredibly precious.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive has given me, and I hope all of you listening, a lot to think about. Until next time, happy soothing.